American influence in Polish media. Poland have a highly polarized media environment. This is a picture from a final debate preceding the Polish presidential hosted by the pro-government TVP. And this is a picture from the same night, another final debate hosted by the anti-government TVN. In this video, I will briefly explain Poland's political media landscape with an emphasis on American influence in the liberal opposition. Foreign owners control roughly 3/4 of a Polish media market. As a spoiler, the same company that owns CNN owns Poland's largest private news network, and the largest newspaper is partially owned by a New York City-based nonprofit. First, let's talk about the currently ongoing repolonization of the media. One of PiS's campaign promises included bringing foreign-owned media in Poland into Polish hands, including by the state buying and nationalizing them. Recently, PiS-controlled state oil giant Orlen purchased hundreds of local newspapers and websites from German owners. However, PiS's repolonization plan only targets German-owned media. They don't dare touch the much more influential American-owned media due to law and justice's subservient geopolitical reliance on America. If they attack American media influence in Poland, this will anger Americans, and who will protect Poland from Nord Stream 2? And unlike the German newspapers and radio stations, the American media influence cannot simply be bought. For example, the US government directly funds an organization that, according to their own website, hires people to counter online speech and campaign from groups and individuals who are anti-LGBT+, anti-abortion, and anti-feminist in Poland. More on this later in the video. TVN. TVN is a liberal opposition yin to TVP's pro-government mouthpiece yang. Everyone in Poland understands that the people working at TVP, Poland's state-owned media outlet, aren't principled journalists seeking to find and disseminate truth, but journalists who spread the narrative their boss wants and avoid those he doesn't want. This is their boss. If they write things that displease him, or write things that challenge his core value or interest, they are very likely to be out of a job. Everyone understands this. However, many liberals in Poland are under the naive illusion that this is only the case with state-controlled TVP. Not so. Journalists all have bosses that they must please, and most are more motivated in keeping their somewhat prestigious careers than reporting truth. In my opinion, the difference between TVN and TVP is only that the boss they need to please changes. So, who is the boss that TVN has to please? In my opinion, the man that TVN journalists have to avoid displeasing is the president and CEO of a parent company, the New York City headquartered Discovery. So I think it is fair to examine if he has any strong views or interests and compare and contrast them with the liberal views TVN propagates in Poland. For me, it does help to explain why journalists at TVN or aspiring journalists auditioning for positions in Polish private media sector will be reluctant to, for example, take a public pro-Palestine stance. I watched an interview the head of Discovery did, talking about himself personally. Here's what I learned. Israel is one of his favorite countries. His family come from Warsaw and Odessa. His grandmother cleaned the streets of Warsaw with a toothbrush and was kicked. The value of never again is a mantra to him. He praises the strength of the Irgun to fight for a free democracy. Here's a picture of him presenting an award to the U.S. ambassador to Poland in recognition of her commitment to promoting tolerance and combating hate for the U.S. diplomatic mission's proactive support of Holocaust education. Does the ownership of TVN influence Polish journalists, even if by self-censorship? Is it a surprise that TVN essentially ignored reporting on the recent conflict between Israel and Gaza? I think it's preposterous to say no. Further, due to the recent merger of Discovery and Warner Media, TVN is now owned by the same company that owns CNN. I expect the reporting standard of CNN to increasingly be the reporting standards of TVN. Gazeta Wyborcza. I'll quickly talk about Gazeta Wyborcza. There's more to this story than I care to say on this channel, but they are the biggest newspaper in Poland, although their influence have waned due to their unrelenting Kaczynski man bad narrative alienating moderate liberals. Gazeta Wyborcza is co-owned by Media Development Investment Fund, a New York City nonprofit. It was initially funded by George Soros. Enough said. Let's talk about the NED. The National Endowment for Democracy is funded by the U.S. Congress. In 1986, NED's president, Carl Gershman, said that the NED was created because, quote, it would be terrible for democratic groups around the world to be seen as subsidized by the CIA. In a 1991 interview in which the then NED president Alan Weinstein said, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA. During the 1990s, Poland was the third largest recipient of NED funding. Here is a picture of Lech Wałęsa receiving an award from the NED in 2019. The NED have been influential in recent events in Eastern Europe. They invested at least $14 million directly into the Ukraine Maidan events. A week ago, 2 Russian pranksters posed as Belarusian opposition figures and joined an online meeting of high-ranking representative of NED. The senior European program officer at the NED revealed that a lot of the people who were trained and educated via the NED various endeavors were pivotal to the events or the build-up of events of last summer. Now, some Polacks will view what the American Empire did in Poland and Ukraine and is doing in Belarus in positive light. Everyone knows that these were the games the Americans play. In the past, it worked out for us. Radio Free Europe has a good reputation in Poland. However, there is something other than regime change that America is funding in Poland currently, something cultural. Last year, it was announced that a project funded by the NED to create a network of independent media outlets that report on Central and Eastern European region in English. The project will support them in reporting on issues relating to democracy, rule of law, civil society, human rights, and media freedom. Their first articles were on the topic of medium freedom and LGBT rights. More worryingly, NED is funding Bellingcat, which is currently hiring for an anti-equality monitoring project. This project involves monitoring Poland for online hate speech and campaigns from far-right groups and individuals. While Law and Justice is not considered far-right in Poland, it would certainly be considered so by Bellingcat. See the definitions here. What do these NED-funded projects in Poland have in common other than they are pathetic, with no engagement, no one cares, and we probably think they are some anti-system rebel while they are basically on the CIA payroll? If you're a journalist at one of these organizations, do you ever think of that? Next time you babble about how important rule of law is, think about what would happen to your career if you mentioned a certain country in the Middle East violating rule of law, or civil society, or human rights. Think about how many wars in the Middle East of people who write your checks are responsible for. Think about how you cannot say anything against that. Anyways, the common thread is that they advocate for things peace-oppositive in Poland and support liberal opposition to the government. My question to peace is, what's your plan, dude? The Americans are pro-LGBT and pro-abortion in Poland. They found groups that advocate these ideologies you don't want to see in Poland. They undermine your allies, and they subvert your ability to hold political power. The people running peace surely must understand this. Yet their alliance system aligns only with America. So, what's going on? In my opinion, peace are boomers who love the old idea of America, and the freedom it had for a long time represented to Poles. When Trump got elected, it was easy for them to overlook the underlying decay. But now, I think everyone, including peace, starts to realize that an American-only reliance is a doomed and flawed strategy, especially for a party that deeply values traditional Polish ideals that are incompatible with America's vision for Poland. Poland might have been willing to stomach a deal that exchanged American influence in Polish society for American support for issues considered essential to Poland, such as Nord Stream 2. But with that dissipating as well, the reasons for the American alliance are quickly eroding. I predict that Poland will slowly shift and try to find other allies, such as Turkey, with who they surprisingly have more common ground with. As for the American influence in media, the solution mechanisms are simple. They could simply copy the foreign ownership laws that France have, which states that non-EU foreign interests must not exceed 20% ownership of a TV company. The only issue is that it will greatly anger the Americans. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Do widzenia.